a soothing adaptation of the Jungle Book. Baloo's wisdom. The jungle's morning light filtered through the trees, casting soft, golden patterns on the forest floor. The air was filled with the chatter of birds and the rustle of small creatures beginning their day. Mowgli wandered through the undergrowth, his bare feet brushing against the cool, dewy grass. His eyes darted from one marvel to another, colorful flowers blooming in patches of sunlight, ants marching in perfect formation, and vines spiraling like ancient decorations on the trees. He had not ventured far when he heard a low, rhythmic hum. It wasn't the chirping of birds or the rustling of leaves, but something deeper, warmer, a melody carried on the breeze. Curious, Mowgli followed the sound until he came to a clearing surrounded by towering bamboo. There, reclining against the trunk of a large tree, was a massive bear. The bear was unlike anything Mowgli had ever seen. His thick fur was a rich, earthy brown, and his round belly rose and fell with each contented breath. His eyes were closed, and his humming continued, blending perfectly with the jungle's symphony. He looked as though he had been carved out of the jungle itself, a creature in complete harmony with the world around him. Mowgli approached cautiously, unsure whether to speak or retreat. The bear, sensing the boy's presence, opened one eye lazily and smiled, a warm, gentle expression that immediately put Mowgli at ease. "Ah, what do we have here?" the bear said, his voice deep and calm, like the rumble of distant thunder. "A man cub, wandering alone in the jungle. You must be Mowgli." Mowgli blinked in surprise. "How do you know my name?" The bear chuckled softly, a sound that rumbled like a friendly purr. "Oh, the jungle knows many things, my young friend. News travels fast here. I am Baloo. The others might have told you about me." Baloo shifted slightly, sitting up with a slow, deliberate movement. He towered over Mowgli, but radiated no menace. Instead, there was a calm wisdom in his eyes, as though he had seen the jungle's every secret and understood them all. "You don't look dangerous," Mowgli said, tilting his head in curiosity. "Bagheera said the jungle is full of dangers." Baloo let out a hearty laugh that echoed through the clearing. "Bagheera is not wrong. The jungle can be a wild place, full of challenges, but it's also full of beauty, balance, and lessons, if you know how to see them." He gestured around him with a broad paw. "This, Mowgli, is a place where everything is connected. Even a tiny ant has its role to play." Mowgli frowned slightly. "But I don't understand how I fit in. I'm not an animal. I don't have claws or sharp teeth. How can I survive here?" Baloo leaned forward, resting his massive paw on the ground beside Mowgli. "Ah, but you have something even more powerful," he said, his voice soft but firm. "You have your mind, your senses, and your ability to adapt. The jungle doesn't demand strength or speed. It asks for respect and understanding." Mowgli considered this, his young mind turning over Baloo's words. "So, if I listen and learn, the jungle will accept me?" Baloo nodded slowly, his wise eyes twinkling. "Exactly. The jungle doesn't favor the strongest. It favors those who live in harmony with it." The bear leaned back against the tree again, his movements fluid despite his size. "Come, sit," he said, patting the ground beside him. "You're safe here. This is my corner of the jungle. and I'll teach you everything you need to know." Mowgli hesitated only for a moment before settling beside Baloo. The bear's presence was as comforting as the shade of the tree under which they sat. For the first time since entering the jungle, Mowgli felt a sense of ease, as though he had found a guide who truly understood the wild world he had entered. Baloo's humming resumed, and Mowgli listened, letting the sound wrap around him like a protective cocoon. He knew the jungle was still vast and filled with dangers, but with Baloo by his side, he felt ready to learn. This wise, gentle bear wasn't just a part of the jungle. He was its heart, and Mowgli couldn't wait to hear all the lessons he had to share. The golden morning sunlight streamed through the canopy as Baloo and Mowgli sat together in the clearing. The bear's deep, rhythmic voice filled the air, blending with the sounds of chirping birds and rustling leaves. Mowgli, sitting cross-legged on the soft grass, watched Baloo with rapt attention. For the first time since entering the jungle, he felt like he was beginning to understand its rhythms and secrets. "The jungle," Baloo began, his voice steady and full of conviction, "is not just a place. It's a world of its own, with its own laws and balance. Every creature, from the smallest ant to the mightiest tiger, plays a role here." Mowgli tilted his head, his young mind full of questions. "Laws? Like the ones in the village?" "Not quite," Baloo said, chuckling softly. "The jungle's laws are different. They're not written in books or spoken by elders. They are felt, understood, and followed by all who live here. These laws are what keep the jungle alive and in harmony." Baloo gestured to a trail of ants marching nearby, each carrying a fragment of leaf. "Take these ants, for example. They work together, each one playing its part. No one is left out, and no one takes more than they need. This is the first rule of the jungle, Mowgli. Respect. Respect the balance, respect others, and respect the jungle itself." Mowgli watched the ants with newfound curiosity. "But what if someone doesn't follow the rules?" he asked. Baloo's expression turned thoughtful. "Ah, there are always those who don't. A snake that strikes without cause. A monkey that takes more than its share of fruit. They upset the balance. And when the balance is disturbed, the jungle has a way of setting it right. That's why it's important to live with respect and understanding." Mowgli nodded slowly, his mind turning over Baloo's words. "What else do I need to know?" Baloo leaned forward, his golden brown eyes meeting Mowgli's. "The second rule is coexistence. The jungle is not a place for lone warriors. Every creature here depends on another in some way. The bees need the flowers need the sun, and even the predators play their part by keeping the herd strong. You, too, must learn to coexist, to give as much as you take." Mowgli frowned slightly. "But I don't have anything to give. I'm not like the animals. I can't hunt or grow food." Baloo smiled warmly. "You have more to give than you realize, Mowgli. Your wisdom, your ability to think and adapt. Those are gifts. The jungle doesn't demand grand gestures. Sometimes, simply showing kindness or lending a helping hand is enough." The bear reached out and plucked a ripe mango from a nearby tree, holding it up for Mowgli to see. "Take this mango, for instance. When you eat it, the seed inside can grow into a new tree, providing food for others in the future. Even in taking, you can give back." Mowgli accepted the mango, turning it over in his hands. So, the jungle doesn't just give things away, it expects you to give back? Exactly, Baloo said, nodding. That's the balance. And the third rule is perhaps the most important. Adapt. The jungle is ever-changing. Seasons come and go, rivers shift their course, and animals migrate. To survive here, you must learn to adapt to these changes. Baloo leaned back, his eyes scanning the clearing. It's not about being the strongest or the fastest, Mowgli. The jungle doesn't reward those who fight against it. It rewards those who flow with it, like a river finding its way around rocks. Mowgli thought about the river he had seen earlier, its water flowing effortlessly over and around obstacles. So, if I want to live here, I have to learn to adapt, to change. Baloo nodded. Precisely. The jungle teaches you to listen, to the sounds, the signs, and even your own instincts. Trust your senses, and you'll find your place here. Mowgli's gaze wandered to a nearby tree, where a small bird was building its nest. It worked tirelessly, weaving twigs and leaves together, adapting to its surroundings to create a safe home. Like that bird? He asked, pointing. Exactly like that bird, Baloo said, his voice warm with approval. It doesn't complain about the wind or the rain. It works with what it has, building something strong and safe. That's what the jungle asks of all of us. Mowgli's young face lit up with understanding. So, if I respect, coexist, and adapt, the jungle will let me stay? Baloo chuckled, a deep, comforting sound. The jungle doesn't let you stay, Mowgli. It welcomes you, but only if you follow its laws. The bear reached out a massive paw and ruffled Mowgli's hair. You've already taken your first steps by listening and learning. Keep doing that, and you'll do just fine. As the morning sun climbed higher, casting its golden light over the clearing, Mowgli felt a sense of peace he hadn't known before. Baloo's words resonated deeply, and for the first time, he felt like he belonged. The jungle was no longer a place of fear or confusion. It was a living, breathing world that he could learn to be a part of. With Baloo as his guide, Mowgli knew he was ready to embrace the lessons of the jungle. He smiled up at the wise bear, grateful for his patience and kindness. Together, they sat in the clearing, surrounded by the symphony of the jungle, and Mowgli felt his heart fill with a quiet determination to respect, coexist, and adapt to his new home. The jungle was alive with the quiet symphony of its many inhabitants. As the sun climbed higher into the sky, Baloo led Mowgli to a shaded clearing near a small stream. The air was cool, and the gentle gurgling of water provided a soothing background to their journey. The bear's steps were slow and deliberate, his gaze scanning their surroundings with practiced ease. Sit here, Baloo said, gesturing to a mossy rock beside the stream. Mowgli obeyed, settling himself on the smooth surface. Baloo reclined nearby, his large form blending seamlessly with the jungle's shadows. Tell me, Mowgli, Baloo began, his voice calm and steady. What do you see? Mowgli looked around, his young eyes wide with curiosity. The clearing was bustling with life. A group of deer grazed on the soft grass near the water's edge, their ears twitching at the slightest sound. Overhead, a family of birds flitted between branches, their cheerful chirping adding to the jungle's melody. Near the stream, a troop of monkeys chattered animatedly, their quick movements causing ripples in the water. I see animals, Mowgli said simply, tilting his head in thought. But they're not fighting. They're just here. Baloo nodded approvingly. Exactly. Look closer, and you'll see more than just animals. You'll see how they live together, each playing a part in the jungle's balance. He pointed a large paw toward the deer. Take them, for example. They eat the grass, but they don't destroy it. They move in herds, keeping the grasslands healthy by not staying in one place too long, and the grass, in turn, grows back stronger, fed by the soil the deer help to turn over. Mowgli's gaze shifted to the birds overhead. And the birds? The birds eat insects, Baloo explained, his tone patient. Some of those insects harm the trees, so the birds help keep the trees healthy. In return, the trees provide the birds with shelter and a place to nest. It's a cycle, Mowgli, a give and take. Mowgli's attention was drawn to the monkeys near the stream. What about them? They just look like they're causing trouble. Baloo chuckled, his deep voice resonating through the clearing. Ah, the monkeys can be mischievous, it's true. But even they play a role. They drop seeds as they move through the jungle, helping plants grow in new places. Even their chatter warns others of danger sometimes. Mowgli furrowed his brow, his mind working to piece it all together. So, everything is connected? Yes, Baloo said with a nod. Every creature here, no matter how small or seemingly unimportant, is part of a larger system. When each does its part, the jungle thrives. But when one disrupts the balance, the entire jungle feels it. As if on cue, a sharp cry echoed through the clearing. Mowgli turned to see a small predator, a jackal, emerging from the underbrush, its eyes locked on the grazing deer. The herd instantly grew alert, their ears swiveling and their bodies poised to flee. But instead of chaos, there was a quiet understanding. The herd moved as one, stepping back toward the denser trees, keeping the weakest members at the center. Mowgli's heart raced as he watched the jackal prowl closer, but Baloo remained calm. "Watch carefully," the bear said. The jackal lunged, but the deer were ready. They scattered with precision, their movements coordinated as they darted into the forest. The jackal stopped, realizing its attempt had failed, and retreated into the shadows. Mowgli let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. They didn't panic, Mowgli observed. They just knew what to do. Baloo smiled. That's the balance at work. The predator plays its role, keeping the herd strong by targeting the weak. But the herd, too, has its strategies, ensuring that only the fittest survive. It's not cruel, Mowgli. It's nature's way. Mowgli nodded slowly, his fear replaced by fascination. So, even when it looks like they're against each other, they're still part of the same system? Exactly, Baloo said, his voice full of approval. The jungle doesn't take sides. It only seeks balance. The two sat in silence for a while, observing the clearing as life returned to normal. The deer resumed their grazing, the birds continued their songs, and the monkeys swung from branch to branch, seemingly unfazed by the brief disturbance. Mowgli found himself marveling at the resilience of it all. Baloo turned to Mowgli, his expression serious but kind. This is one of the most important lessons of the jungle, man-cub. Respect the balance. Take only what you need, and give back when you can. If you do, The jungle will provide for you." Mowgli nodded, the weight of Baloo's words settling in his mind. But what happens if someone breaks the balance? Baloo's gaze grew distant for a moment. Then, the jungle suffers. When one takes too much or disrupts the cycle, others must adapt. Sometimes they succeed, and sometimes they don't. That's why the laws of the jungle exist, to protect this balance. Mowgli looked down at the stream, watching the way the water flowed smoothly over the rocks. "So, I have to learn to live like this stream," he said thoughtfully, flowing around the obstacles, but always moving forward. Baloo grinned, his eyes twinkling with pride. "You're learning fast, Mowgli." "Yes, like the stream, always in harmony with the jungle." As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the clearing, Mowgli felt a sense of connection he hadn't known before. The jungle was no longer just a wild, mysterious place. It was a living, breathing world of interconnected lives and intricate relationships. Baloo rose to his feet, stretching his massive form. "Come, man cub. There's much more to see, and the jungle has many more lessons to teach." Mowgli stood, his heart full of determination. He wasn't just a visitor in the jungle anymore. He was becoming a part of it, one step at a time. And as he followed Baloo into the deepening shadows, he knew that he would carry this lesson with him always. Respect the balance, and the jungle will thrive. The jungle was quieter than usual, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the forest floor. Mowgli followed Baloo as they walked along a narrow trail, the boy's footsteps lighter now, after days of learning to tread softly. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, and the distant sound of water trickling over rocks added to the tranquil atmosphere. Mowgli's curiosity bubbled just beneath the surface as he wondered what lesson awaited him today. Baloo came to a halt near a clearing, his massive paw raised to signal Mowgli to stop. "Sit here," the bear whispered, his voice low but firm. Mowgli obeyed, settling on a flat rock partially hidden by a curtain of vines. He peered through the foliage, his dark eyes scanning the clearing. "What are we watching for?" Mowgli asked, his voice barely audible. Baloo glanced at him with a small, knowing smile. "Patience, man cub. Today, you'll learn the value of waiting. Look closely at the far side of the clearing." Mowgli squinted, his gaze following Baloo's instructions. There, partially hidden in the shadows, was a sleek predator, a leopard, its golden coat dappled with black rosettes, blending perfectly with the filtered sunlight. The big cat crouched low to the ground, every muscle in its body coiled with tension. Its gaze was fixed on a small herd of deer grazing near the edge of the clearing, their ears twitching and tails flicking as they nibbled at the tender grass. Mowgli's breath hitched, his pulse quickening. Is it going to attack them? "Watch and learn," Baloo replied softly. "This is not a mindless chase. The leopard knows that every step, every moment, matters. Its survival depends on precision and patience." The leopard remained motionless, its body a study in stillness. The only movement was the slight flicker of its tail, swishing just above the ground as it gauged the perfect moment to strike. Mowgli marveled at the predator's focus, its ability to ignore the distractions of the jungle around it. "Why doesn't it just attack now?" Mowgli asked, his voice tinged with impatience. "It's so close." Baloo chuckled quietly, the sound barely more than a rumble. Because, Mowgli, the leopard knows it only has one chance. If it rushes, it risks alerting the deer, and they'll escape before it can even get close. Patience is not just a virtue, it's a necessity. Mowgli fell silent, his gaze fixed on the scene before him. The deer continued to graze, blissfully unaware of the danger lurking nearby. The leopard, too, seemed almost frozen, its body pressed low against the ground, blending seamlessly with the shadows. Minutes passed, though to Mowgli, they felt like hours. His legs began to ache from sitting still, but he didn't dare move. He wanted to understand what Baloo meant, to see the lesson unfold with his own eyes. Suddenly, the leopard shifted. Its movements were so slow, so deliberate, that they were almost imperceptible. It crept forward, inch by inch, its paws barely making a sound as they touched the ground. Mowgli held his breath, his heart pounding in his chest. Just as the leopard seemed ready to spring, one of the deer raised its head, its ears swiveling toward the predator. Mowgli's stomach clenched as he expected the scene to erupt into chaos. But instead of panicking, the leopard froze, its gaze locked on the deer. The two creatures remained in a silent standoff, the tension in the air palpable. After a moment, the deer returned to grazing, its suspicion seemingly eased. The leopard waited a little longer, then crept forward again, its movements as fluid and precise as water flowing around stones. Finally, the moment came. The leopard sprang from the shadows, a blur of power and grace. The herd scattered instantly, their hooves thundering against the ground as they bolted for the safety of the trees. But the leopard's focus never wavered. Its claws struck true, and within seconds, it had its prize, a young deer caught in its powerful jaws. Mowgli's breath escaped in a quiet gasp. He watched as the leopard dragged its kill into the underbrush, disappearing into the jungle. The clearing grew quiet once more, the only sounds the rustling of leaves and the distant calls of birds. Baloo turned to Mowgli, his golden brown eyes serious but kind. "What did you learn, man-cub?" Mowgli hesitated, his thoughts racing. The leopard didn't rush. It waited for the right moment, even when it could have attacked earlier. It was patient. Baloo nodded, his expression approving. "Exactly. The jungle doesn't reward haste, Mowgli. It rewards those who take the time to understand their surroundings, to act only when the moment is right." "But it still looked hard," Mowgli said, frowning. "It waited so long, and it still didn't get all the deer." "That's another lesson," Baloo said, leaning back against a tree. "In the jungle, survival isn't about greed. The leopard took what it needed and let the rest go. That's balance, Mowgli. Taking only what you need, even when you're capable of taking more." Mowgli nodded slowly, the weight of Baloo's words sinking in. "So, patience isn't just about waiting. It's about knowing when to act and when not to." "Exactly," Baloo said, smiling warmly. "The jungle is full of opportunities, but it doesn't tolerate waste. If you can learn to be patient, to watch and listen, you'll find your place here." Mowgli looked back at the clearing, now empty, but still alive with the echoes of what had just happened. The jungle wasn't just a place of survival. It was a teacher, constantly offering lessons to those willing to observe and learn. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting golden light through the trees. Mowgli felt a newfound respect for the world around him. The jungle wasn't just wild, it was wise. "I'll be patient," he said softly. "I'll learn." Baloo's laughter rumbled like distant thunder. "Good, man cub. That's the spirit. Now come. The jungle has many more lessons to teach." Together, they disappeared into the shadows, the clearing behind them fading into the jungle's endless symphony. The jungle was calm as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting its warm amber glow over the treetops. The soft rustling of leaves in the evening breeze and the distant call of a bird created a tranquil symphony. Mowgli sat cross-legged on a mossy patch of ground beside a clear stream, his reflection shimmering in the gentle ripples. Baloo sat nearby, leaning against a broad tree trunk, his eyes half closed, but his presence as steady and grounding as the jungle itself. Mowgli's mind was alive with the lessons of the day. The images of the leopard's patient hunt and Baloo's steady words lingered, their meaning sinking deeper into his heart. He picked up a smooth pebble from the ground, turning it over in his hands as he mulled over what he had seen and learned. "The leopard," Mowgli began, his voice soft but thoughtful. "It waited so long. It didn't rush, even when the deer were right there. How does it know to be so patient?" Baloo opened one eye, his golden gaze warm and steady. "The leopard doesn't think about patience the way we do," he said. "It simply knows that survival depends on timing. It has learned, through many hunts, that one wrong step can mean the difference between a meal and hunger. The jungle teaches its lessons to all who live within it." Mowgli nodded, still rolling the pebble between his fingers. "But it's hard to wait like that," he admitted. "I don't know if I could do it." "Patience is not easy, man cub," Baloo agreed, his voice deep and gentle. "But it's one of the most powerful tools you have. It gives you clarity, helps you see what others might miss. The leopard waits because it trusts in the moment. And you too can learn to trust in the jungle." Mowgli glanced around, his gaze sweeping over the tall trees that seemed to stretch endlessly into the sky. Their branches swayed gently, whispering secrets only they could understand. He took a deep breath, letting the earthy scent of the forest fill his lungs. The jungle felt different now, not as a wild, untamed place, but as a living, breathing entity that he was beginning to understand. "Today," Mowgli said, his voice growing steadier, "I saw how everything in the jungle is connected. The leopard, the deer, even the grass they eat, they're all part of the same story." Baloo smiled, leaning forward slightly. "And that story is what keeps the jungle alive," he said. "It's a balance, Mowgli. Every creature plays its part, and together they create something greater than themselves. The jungle doesn't need kings or rulers. It thrives on harmony." Mowgli thought of the ants he had watched earlier, their tiny legs carrying leaves many times their size. He thought of the birds singing in the trees and the monkeys swinging from branch to branch, scattering seeds as they went. Each creature had its purpose, its role in this intricate dance. He couldn't help but feel humbled by the realization. "Baloo," Mowgli asked, his voice filled with a quiet wonder, "do you think I can ever be a part of this? I mean, I'm not like the animals. I don't have claws or wings or anything special." Baloo chuckled softly, a deep sound that resonated like distant thunder. "You're already a part of it, man cub," he said. "The jungle doesn't ask you to be something you're not. It only asks that you listen, learn, and respect the life around you. Your place here isn't about claws or wings. It's about understanding." Mowgli felt a warmth spread through his chest, a sense of belonging that he hadn't known before. He looked down at the pebble in his hand, its surface smooth and worn from years of being shaped by the stream. "Like this pebble," he said suddenly. "It's not strong or sharp, but the water made it smooth. It found its place." Baloo's eyes gleamed with approval. "Exactly, Mowgli. The jungle shapes us, just as the stream shapes the stone. But you must let it. Be patient, trust the process, and you'll find that you belong here just as much as any other creature." The boy leaned back, his gaze lifting to the sky, where the first stars were beginning to twinkle. Their pale light peeked through the canopy, casting faint patterns on the forest floor. He felt a connection to them, as though they, too, were part of the jungle's story, watching over its endless cycle of life. For a long time, Mowgli and Baloo sat in comfortable silence. The boy's thoughts wandered through the events of the day: the leopard's calculated hunt, the harmony of the clearing, and Baloo's wise teachings. He realized that he wasn't just learning to survive in the jungle. He was learning to live in it, to understand its rhythms and respect its ways. "Baloo," Mowgli said finally, his voice quiet but firm, "I think I'm starting to understand. The jungle doesn't just give things away. It makes you earn them by being patient, by working with it." Baloo grinned, his teeth gleaming in the fading light. "You're learning fast, man cub. The jungle is a teacher like no other. It can be harsh, but it is always fair." Mowgli let his eyes close for a moment, his breathing steady as he let the sounds of the jungle wash over him. The rustling leaves, the murmuring stream, the distant calls of nocturnal creatures. It was all part of the same song, one that he was beginning to feel in his bones. When he opened his eyes, the sky was a canvas of stars, and the jungle had grown darker, but no less alive. Mowgli felt a deep sense of peace, a quiet confidence that he hadn't known before. He turned to Baloo, his face lit with gratitude. "Thank you," he said simply. Baloo chuckled again, reaching out to pat Mowgli's shoulder with his massive paw. "The jungle thanks you too, man cub. You're listening to it now, and that's the first step to truly belonging." As the night deepened, Mowgli lay back on the mossy ground, the jungle's sounds lulling him into a quiet reflection. The day's lessons swirled in his mind, filling him with respect for Baloo's wisdom and the intricate world he was becoming a part of. With the stars watching over him and the jungle embracing him, he felt ready for whatever came next. The jungle had settled into its nighttime rhythm, a symphony of whispers and murmurs that filled the air with a soothing hum. The moon hung high above, its silver light cascading through the canopy, casting dappled patterns on the forest floor. Baloo and Mowgli sat beneath a towering tree, its gnarled roots forming a natural cradle around them. The day had been long, filled with lessons and observations, and both teacher and student were enveloped in a quiet sense of fulfillment. Mowgli leaned back against the tree trunk, his legs stretched out on the soft moss. His eyes wandered upward, tracing the web of branches above, where fireflies flickered like tiny stars caught in the leaves. The cool night air brushed against his skin, carrying the earthy scent of the jungle. He felt an unfamiliar calm, a sense of belonging that had eluded him until now. Beside him, Baloo reclined with his massive form resting against the roots, his breathing deep and steady. The bear's golden brown eyes were half closed, but his ears twitched now and then, attuned to the sounds of the night. Despite his relaxed posture, his presence exuded strength and assurance, a quiet reminder that Mowgli was not alone. After a stretch of comfortable silence, Mowgli spoke, his voice soft but sincere. "Baloo, thank you." Baloo opened one eye, his gaze warm and curious. "For what, man-cub?" "For everything," Mowgli said, his words spilling out in a rush. "For teaching me, for showing me how the jungle works, and for making me feel like I belong." Baloo's hearty chuckle rumbled through the night, a sound as comforting as the rustling leaves. "Ah, Mowgli, you're the one doing all the hard work. I'm just pointing you in the right direction." "But it's more than that," Mowgli insisted, sitting up straighter. "When I first came here, I didn't know anything. I was scared of the shadows, the sounds, everything. I thought I could never survive here. But you showed me that the jungle isn't something to fear. It's something to learn from." Baloo regarded Mowgli with quiet pride, his eyes reflecting the moonlight. "The jungle is a teacher," he said, his voice low and thoughtful, "but only for those willing to listen. You've opened your heart to its lessons, man-cub. That takes courage, and not everyone has it." Mowgli looked down at his hands, tracing the lines of his palms, as though they held the key to the jungle's secrets. "I think I'm starting to understand," he said. "The jungle doesn't just give you what you want. It makes you earn it by being patient, by paying attention." Baloo nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Exactly. The jungle rewards those who respect it, who live in harmony with its rhythms. And you, Mowgli, are learning to do just that." The boy smiled, a flicker of pride warming his chest. He felt different now, not just a visitor in the jungle, but a part of it. The lessons Baloo had shared, the quiet observations they had made together, had woven themselves into the fabric of his being. He glanced at Baloo, his gaze filled with gratitude. "You've given me so much, Baloo. I don't know how I can ever repay you." Baloo chuckled again, his massive paw swiping lazily at the air. "Repay me? Nonsense. The jungle gave me these lessons long ago, and now I'm just passing them on. One day, you'll do the same for someone else." Mowgli's brows furrowed in thought. "You think I could teach someone? Like you've taught me?" "Why not?" Baloo said with a grin. "You've got a good head on your shoulders, man-cub. And you've got something even more important, heart. That's what it takes to truly understand the jungle." Mowgli let the words settle, their weight filling him with a quiet determination. He leaned back against the tree once more, his gaze lifting to the stars that sparkled above. They seemed closer now, their light more intimate, as though they too were part of the jungle's vast and intricate web. The night deepened, and the jungle's song grew softer, more subdued. Mowgli's eyes grew heavy, but he fought the pull of sleep, unwilling to let the moment end. He turned to Baloo one last time, his voice a whisper. "Thank you, Baloo, for everything." Baloo smiled, his golden eyes gleaming with affection. "Rest now, man-cub," he said gently. "Tomorrow, the jungle will have more to teach, and you'll need your strength." Mowgli nodded, his body sinking into the soft moss as he allowed himself to relax completely. The sounds of the jungle wrapped around him like a lullaby, and the steady presence of Baloo nearby anchored him in a way he had never felt before. As the boy drifted into sleep, Baloo watched over him, his gaze soft and protective. The bear knew the jungle would shape Mowgli in ways even he couldn't predict, but he also knew the boy was ready. Mowgli had embraced the jungle's lessons with an open heart, and in doing so, had found not just survival, but connection, purpose, and belonging. The jungle hummed on, its eternal rhythm unbroken, as two kindred spirits, bear and boy, rested together beneath the canopy of stars. As you close your eyes, let the echoes of this story guide you to peace. Drift gently into sleep, knowing you are part of a world where love and wisdom shine bright. May your dreams be calm, comforting, and filled with wonder.